got some good examples of templates and stuff.
Awesome. Well, good morning, everyone, or good afternoon, depending on where you are. My name is Jamie Good. I'm the Digital Fluency Coach, and I've started this Bright Minds Blab Chat series to be able to connect with smart people around the world, talk to them about what they're experts in, and while I'm learning, hope that you'll learn along with us. So today we've got Corey Melanson. If you would like to introduce yourself, I'm really happy to have you here today.
Great, thanks, Jamie. Yeah, I'm Corey Melanson. I'm with C Meaning Graphic Facilitation based in Halifax, Nova Scotia. So I'm a facilitator and a graphic recorder and a graphic facilitator. I've been doing this work for about 7 years or so.
Awesome. Wow, I didn't realize it was that long.
Yeah.
And I met Corey, there's a conference in Toronto every year that is for the learning and development professionals in Canada, well, worldwide too. We have some international people that come. And I did a session, it was last year, I believe, and Corey facilitated the session for me, and I had done a workshop the year before. She graphic recorded a keynote last year, and I just think it's really amazing what you do. So when I decided to do this Bright Minds series, I thought, I gotta get Corey on here.
And yeah, the other thing that I love also more than anything is kind of teaching other people also how to integrate visuals into their work. So while I am a graphic recorder, I'm trying to put myself out of work because I really see visuals as like a skill, not like a role, okay. So that everyone could be and should be integrating visuals into what they do. And I know we're going to talk lots about that today, but as opposed to, oh, great, I want visuals for my meeting or my conference, I have to hire someone, I have to hire a graphic recorder who knows how to do this. One of my passions is really putting markers in the hands of people to show them that you too can do this work.
Oh, awesome. And I think that's an awesome approach to it, because a lot of people get a little afraid and say, oh, I can't draw, but it's not necessarily about having the skill to draw. I think so. Why do you feel it's important to add a visual component to learning?
So I've made some handy-dandy props, visual props. So I guess the first one really is this one, which is, can you see this, or is it backwards to you?
Oh, it's right, yeah.
Okay. So up to 88% of us are visual learners. So I don't know if you can see in this image, but there's like 1 or 2 people that are colored in pink. But I mean, and the percentages, sure, some people say 70%, other people say 88%, and but really, so many of us are visual learners. So for me, about 8 years ago, I was working for a national nonprofit. We had our 3-day meeting, and they brought in a graphic facilitator, Sarah at Sarah Graphics, based in Montreal. And for 3 days, I watched Sarah do her work. And 8 years later, I can still remember some of her images. And it was a huge aha moment for me. I was like, I'm a visual learner. Oh my gosh, as a facilitator, I really need also to integrate this into my work. So 88% of it. So, and while I'm dominantly a visual learner, I'm also a kinesthetic learner. Like there's, lots of overlap, I guess, in those different learning styles. So we're not just one, but this is huge. So, and the reality is most trainings cater to auditory learners, and they are only around 10% of the population. So that's kind of my first one.
That's the thing. That's the thing that always shocks me about college and university, when you have those massive lecture halls and you have this one sage on the stage, standing in front, talking, like fall asleep. Like, it's amazing, isn't it?
Exactly. So this guy, everyone should check out. He's a guy named Dan Rome, and he has written some books on the back of a napkin. And so what he says is that any problems can be made clear with pictures, and any picture can be made with the same set of tools and rules. So you sort of see some of these very simple icons across the bottom: the globe, a hand, what I call sort of a box or a triangle person, a calendar, and like a lens. And so again, when I teach people what are some of those skills of graphics, I talk about 6 essential elements, and those are things like color, bullets, containers, people and expressions. What else? connectors. So those simple set of tools and rules, you can draw a lot of pictures with those. Sometimes in the workshops that I do, we draw a circle, a square, and a triangle. And I ask people to come up with 10 things right away. So we draw 10 circles, 10 squares, 10 triangles. What can you make out of those? So really, those tools and rules are so simple.
Yeah,
all right.
Sure.
Let's do another one. So this one, just the idea of combining images and narration, or images and kind of that auditory piece, increase recall and retention. So these are really training, and learning the language, and transfer and application by, what is that, 89%. So that's huge, that transfer and application. So you go to a training, you go to an event, great, that was awesome, walk out the door and don't really know what to do with that. Whereas if you're combining these things, you're increasing retention, recall, and application by huge margins.
That's awesome. Those are great.
All right, I have 3 more. So this one is that the idea of visuals actually trumps all our other senses and uses half of our brain's resources. So again, this idea that if you ignore kind of visuals for learning, you're ignoring like certainly a huge percentage of the population, but then also a huge sense of like, okay, how does our brain work, and like the brain functioning.
Wow,
and this kind of goes along with that functioning too, but so we process visuals 60,000 times faster than text. So in terms of efficiency in training and learning, the use of visuals will allow people to process information so much faster. What I find in meetings when I'm incorporating visuals or doing graphic recording is that groups then get on the same page and are able to move forward in, whether it's planning or visioning or whatever it is, they can move so much faster through a lot of material because people are just processing that a lot faster. Okay, last one.
I love these.
Doodling increases memory by 29%. This actually comes from Sunny Brown. She wrote a book called The Doodle Revolution. And really great book, totally recommend it. But just that idea, even if you're doodling, and she has a great YouTube called Doodlers, or TED Talk called Doodlers Unite. And I show that a lot when I'm doing training, particularly in workplaces, because it's all about why should we doodle at work? So not just, whatever, in our spare time or doodle our to-do list or whatever, but why should we doodle at work? So those are some of the reasons why I do what I do and why I incorporate visuals.
Oh, that's awesome. And I think I've seen that TED Talk because I'm a hardcore doodler. So I remember that. And I have Dan Rome's book. I saw him speak maybe, 4 years ago at the Rotman School of Management. And I was just sitting there like in awe because I just love what he was talking about. And it made so much sense. I'm glad you mentioned those 2 people. Just as a note, I, along with these Bright Minds Lab chats now, I'm starting to add some sort of extras and sort of show notes, I guess you call them. So after we can get maybe images of those things that you've drawn and shared so that I can put them up on that for people who, for example, weren't here or just want to reference them later, because those are great visuals. Thank you. So now with the retention, that's a very interesting thing that I've heard before too, because it's so connected to neuroscience, right? The statistics on what we forget after we've learned something is insane. Like within a week, we've lost like 75% of what we learned. So I love that you have some stats there about how the visual can help you retain so much more. And it doesn't mean that it's just a static PowerPoint sometimes too. I like that when you're doing the graphic facilitation and recording, there's some movement, there's some action, there's something to watch and engage your brain and your senses with. And that's what I think is a really kind of added bonus to what you do.
Mm-hmm. For sure.
So how do you, like, one of the things I was wondering when I watched you graphic record the keynote last year from the, I believe it was the man from Cirque du Soleil.
Yes.
I remember I was in the front row because I always like to be in the front row, and I was watching what you're doing, and I sit there and I think like, how does she know what the meat is of the keynote? Like, what is the part that you should draw? What is the part that you should ignore? And because I'm thinking like it's a kind of a form of multitasking in a way where you are listening for the good pieces and then thinking how you're going to draw them, but not just how you're going to draw them, how you're going to connect them and what colors. So how do you manage to focus on the meat of these presentations when you're doing that?
So that's a really good question. And sometimes I know some stuff in advance. Okay. So that's one of the ways I can say, oh yeah, okay, even though they're talking, this person is going to talk for an hour, I've either seen their slides or I've gotten a few pointers of kind of what's coming at me, but sometimes I don't. In the case of the Cirque du Soleil presentation, I had really no idea what was coming at me. So I want to share with you, and I'm moving my camera over, tell me if you can see this, but just a pie chart here. Because again, when I'm teaching people, so is this coming up? Yeah. So when I'm teaching people about what are the skills involved in graphic recording or graphic facilitation, and this does lead back to your question, but the key thing here is that 50% of the work is actually about listening. So 50% is really not, it's not about drawing at all. It's that listening piece, because you can't actually get key content unless you're fully listening. So sometimes people come into my workshops, for example, and they actually are visual artists, and they have no problem at all with, I lay out a concept. So we do a graphic jam, and I say, okay, draw collaboration, draw communication, and boom, they whip it off. But then I do something like play a TED Talk that goes really fast, and that listening piece is what that person really needs to work on. So if we fill out the rest of this pie chart, we've got about 20% here, 20% here, and 10% here. Jamie, I'm going to put you on the spot. Do you have any idea what you think like those percentages might be?
Okay, so 50% is listening, 20%, I would say. This is a really good question for me. I'm thinking, so, I don't know what the percentages are, but I'm thinking that the other pieces might be color choices or style maybe, or okay. I'm thinking maybe another thing is connecting, how to connect it so that it makes sense. I don't know if that's one of the things, but that's just so it's on the top of my head.
So I would say those are in those 6 essential elements of drawing. Okay. What this is kind of what are the 4 skills that you're using when you're graphic recording. So I'm going to help you out.
Okay, skills.
Listening, and then we have synthesizing. So great, you're listening, got a really great speaker, but there's this huge amount of information, and you need to funnel it down to what's really key. Yeah. So that 20% of your work that you're doing as a graphic recorder is synthesizing. Then the other 20% is really organizing. So great, I've heard, the 5 key, whatever it is. So how do you organize that on the page? That's what you were actually just talking about, which is, okay, what colors do you use to help organize? Yeah. How do you connect to help organize? So actually, in terms of organizing, all of those kind of skills come into the organizing piece. Okay. And then this usually surprises people. 10% is actually about drawing.
Wow.
So the big piece of the work is listening. Then you've got synthesizing. Then how do you organize it on the page? And then drawing is really that, oh, okay, I'm going to add this visual icon just to, back up what I've already synthesized and organized. So this one usually kind of blows people away because they say, oh, great, it's all about drawing. Yeah. So does that make sense?
Yeah, it totally makes sense, and I can see how someone who is let's say a working artist or someone who draws would. Yeah. I can imagine that you might put that up on the wall, and they're like, "What? Like that can't be right," because it seems so contrary to what we would originally think. But it totally, like when you're explaining it, because I've seen you do this, it totally makes sense to me. Because how could you go with drawing first if you haven't even been listening? Right? Like, it totally makes sense.
So I mean, in the case of a recording, I'm doing these things. So first, I guess one of the things that, again, like as a newbie, I was kind of scared to stand still in front of my chart. Again, so in that case, at the last year's CSTD conference, Canadian Society for Training and Development, I was up on stage, and there's hundreds of people in the audience. So I'm kind of sharing that limelight in a sense. With the speaker in a very different way. I'm not speaking, I'm not sharing my ideas, but I'm trying to capture them. So one of the things in terms of that is to be okay, it's okay not to capture everything that speaker says. So you have to wait and you have to listen for those key things. Then you have to think about, okay, so that, so that's, you listen, then I keep doing this like, funnel thing, so because it's about funneling, okay, what is key in that. So sometimes, for example, I'll do things like write some ideas on stickies and put it up, thinking that might be key, but it might not be.
Oh, yeah.
Or write something in pencil. So if I write something here in pencil, this kind of mimics. So did you see what I just wrote? No. So I often say things, and I often introduce my best friends as a graphic recorder. And so some of my best friends are the pencil, the eraser. I have some more best friends, but that might be another Blab chat. So I might write some stuff up in pencil as I'm listening and hearing things, thinking, okay, I think that's the key thing, but maybe it isn't. Because again, in an hour-long presentation, you don't really know kind of what's coming. Yeah.
That's a really good idea. That's a great idea.
And then then if we move kind of to the organizing piece, even though I might not necessarily know the content of someone's presentation, I usually at least know the broad strokes. So in that case, it was something around creativity and innovation, right? I'm right, huh?
Yep.
So creativity and innovation kind of in the workplace. Yep. And how do you ensure that that creativity and innovation can kind of can live, can grow, and can really thrive in a workplace. And so I knew that I was going to be writing some content around creativity and innovation. So in that case, in terms of organizing, I'm thinking ahead of time, okay, so what are some cool icons or ideas that would really bring that idea of creativity alive? In this case, it was Cirque du Soleil, and so I thought about literally a circus tent. So if you go back to that graphic, actually, I may not have thought about it ahead of time, but then that idea of circus tent, carnival, creativity. So sometimes the other thing I might do, though, again with my pencil, is map out, if this is the whole chart, I will map out my first 15 minutes just in a big circle, my second 15 minutes, and my third 15 minutes, so that I don't fill up the whole chart in the first 15 minutes, knowing that there's lots more content to come. And then figure out ways to connect some of those ideas.
That's a really good.
So those are some of the things that I would do ahead of time. So so a couple of other things. One is I'm gonna pick my colors ahead of time, so that I'm not in the moment going, oh, should I use green or blue, or what should I do? So I pick my color palette. Yep. I know my title, and I figure out my title. I think about those key icons that connect with the theme. I almost always think about, okay, how am I gonna display my headings, subheadings? So you have a title, you have headings because you want people to be able to follow, okay, what were the main topics of this conversation? So I would say those are pretty key. So colors, title, headings, key icons ahead of time. And then in the moment, I'm kind of doing this piece. Although some of that prep stuff is around the organizing.
So Catherine just asked a question. You're doing that in advance, and I think you just answered that. That is all in advance, right?
So yeah, that would be in advance. The other thing often is that I might check in with the speaker, even if it's 5 minutes ahead of time. So even if I do receive slides, sometimes I'll get like, 50 slides, and I'll quickly run through them and don't always get the gist. Or in a good way, lots of folks are using a lot more visuals in their PowerPoints these days, so they don't always have words to explain what those visuals mean. In this case, Cirque du Soleil guy used a lot of visuals, lots of videos and visuals, and really not many words. So even if I had received that presentation, it wouldn't have really made sense to me. So yeah, in this case, I might go to the speaker 5 minutes, introduce myself. Hey, I'm going to record your conversation. I am, if you could get, what would you say are the kind of key highlights of this presentation? And that will help me already just begin to know how am I going to use that space. So yeah, lots of that stuff is done ahead of time.
Awesome. So you were mentioning to me when we first talked about this, about something called visual templates.
Yeah, visual templates.
I remember when you mentioned that to me that I didn't really know what that it would entail and what that meant. So what are the visual templates, and how do you think they help us to learn and to teach people and ourselves?
Yeah, so and this is where I am actually going to turn my back a little bit, and I'm going to graphic record myself. Does that make sense?
Yeah, sure, go for it.
A little bit. I mean, we have the time. So, and I just want to make sure
Yep.
You can see this. Visual templates. Because I do a fair bit of, again, teaching people how to use visual tools, I'm going to talk about what visual templates are. I'm going to talk about how they support group work. And then I also want to talk about, so for me, when I'm telling someone, here's how to design and use a visual template, I'm going to give away my top 5 secrets for designing and using visual templates. So you're getting my key work here. But one of the things that I love to do is to share kind of my process. Like, so what am I doing and why am I doing that, right? So what are they? So really, what visual templates are, and I'm not sure how, can you see that okay? What visual templates are really structured drawings with blank spaces for text. Should have filled up my markers before I started this, because I have reusable markers. So if you think about what is a structured drawing, and I'm going to give you some examples in a minute. So a structured drawing might be something like this. So we're going to do a little pathway leading to the sun in this example. But there's lots of space on the pathway, on the sides to write some information in. Or a structured drawing might be something like, we want to talk about the values, the hidden values of our organization. So the idea of a metaphor like an iceberg, for example. So an iceberg, you see only what you see up here, but all of the hidden assumptions and ideas are below. So again, structured drawing, space for text. A template might just be containers where you're putting some questions in and you're leaving some space for text. So I'm also going to show you a few examples. So for example, this is called the Soulful Template. So a soulful life. And this is actually this is a personal template so that one person would fill out. So you can see they've used some containers here to make sure that there's space for people to answer these questions. So I intend to create, I release the resistance of, and then there's some icons that connect with what the questions are. So release, got a fire with some smoke coming out here. So that's kind of an example of a personal template. Yeah. Do you want me to show you a few more? Okay. So this is an example. I just used this one the other day with a group. This was a health group, and we were talking about strengths of the group. So we started with a question, what are we doing well? And so what happened here is that each individual, again, filled this out as an individual. Then they paired up in teams and shared what their thoughts were. And then we had a discussion as a larger group of about 10. And then I recorded that larger conversation of what are the highlights of all of these conversations. So what are we doing well? 3 most important things to create the ideal future, and what are you most proud of in your work? So again, 3 structure drawing, space for text so that someone can fill that in, but it sort of tells the story, right? Oh, we're doing something well, and this is on our pathway to the future. And then there's a signpost here. Oh, here's what we're really proud of. Let's share this. Let's yeah.
As soon as you start to explain that, I thought, my God, that would be like it's so much easier for people to understand what they need to do in your session based on just seeing that visually like that.
Yeah. So actually, that's great because I'm going to add that up here because one of my secrets to designing and using templates is just that, one of the ways that they support groups is that they guide the conversation. Yeah. So, and I have to say I've never graphically recorded from a chair before. So this is new for me because I'm not standing up. So I didn't have a desk. Tall enough. So yeah. So they totally guide the conversation. And what I find is that groups. It's really easy then for groups to know. Oh, what are we doing? And I'm showing you examples of kind of those small individual templates, but visual templates can also. I make table-sized templates so that 8 or 10 people sitting around a table are actually filling in that table template. Again, here's another example of simple template. So we've got what are the strengths? This was a school-based one. What are some of the challenges we're facing? And then what are some of our dreams? So again, you want that simple imagery, simple icons. It can't be too complicated because you have to leave the space for folks to fill it in. Here's some of my sort of template frameworks that I have created. Again, there's no words or questions here because I wanted folks to be able to fill in their own. But the idea, again, of roadways leading to a city with some signposts. What's that big title up at the top with the plane? This one I often use for things like an agenda. So I'd put here we are in the rocket ship is the objectives, or where are we headed? What are we trying to do? And then down closer to the Earth is, well, how do we get there? So I use that one a lot. Again, roadmap. So many organizations ask me to draw journey maps for them. We're on this journey of whatever it is, a vision, a strategy. And so what's our journey map? So you can see lots of blank space for text. And then this one, because I live in Halifax, I do often ask for ocean metaphors. So this idea of, okay, we've got some stuff going up on kind of top of the water, maybe some bright shining, that could be strengths, that could be a title. But we also have some sharks here. Those might be challenges or barriers. Down here we've got some treasure, but it's kind of buried. So again, you can see also in these templates the use of metaphor. Yeah. So I heard this quote that if they say a picture is worth 1,000 words, then a metaphor is worth 1,000 pictures. Awesome. So I don't know who said it. But the idea, so I work a lot, one of my styles, my graphic style is to use metaphor a lot. So I'm often asking the groups and the clients that I work with, okay, we're doing this work on fill in the blank. What's a good metaphor that's coming to your mind? And because 88% of us are visual learners, guess what happens? People have a lot of ideas. Yeah. So it's not like I'm coming up with these on my own and saying, here's what I've created for you. So after we've kind of looked at those examples, let's go back to our wall here and fill in a little bit more of this. Let's see. So now if we move over, I'm going to move us over a little bit to the how. The how piece. So how do templates support groups? So Jamie, I'm a facilitator at heart, so of course I'm going to throw this back to you. So you picked up which is that they guide the conversation. Like how do you think templates, other ways that templates support groups?
Well, one of the things that I was seeing with what you were showing and how you're asking people with metaphors is that they engage people more.
Definitely. Yeah, for sure.
And so it'd be more engaging. But the other thing is it would help people stay on track because when I looked at your one drawing, and like you said, if I were in a group working on one of those templates, we wouldn't probably need to ask you, oh, Corey, what do we have to do next again? Like we would just follow the drawing.
For sure. So this is where I actually put this in a couple of ways. I think they save time.
Oh, totally.
They really save time because people, again, they know what they're doing. They're guided in the conversation, and they don't facilitate. Or the worst thing is, okay, you've given the steps out, and then inevitably someone's going to say, "What did you just say?" But when there's a visual template in front of them, all the questions are there. It's a laid out process. So saving time. And then the other thing, I call it, I mean, it's engaging, yes. It's also helping people to see the big picture. So especially with kind of use of metaphor, they can see, oh, okay, here's what we're doing. Here's why. Here's what it connects to. So it really helps folks see the big picture.
I think like I really hope that every organization in Canada hires you because the more you're talking about this, the more I'm just like, oh my God, people need this.
Yeah, good. Yeah, they definitely need this for sure. So the other thing and I think you mentioned it, and these are just my words again, but it helps to really simplify the process, but simplify teaching tools, for example. Yep. So again, as opposed to long explanations or, okay, here's multiple steps, or we have one question, then another, it's just all laid out there on the template. So simplify the process.
Yeah, because I'm just thinking for myself, for some workshops I have coming up, that instead of me saying, okay, first you're going to do this, and then I want you to do that, and then I want you to do this, and then I want you to do that, which every time I say that, I know I'm probably going to end up repeating it anyway. If I laid down one of those templates and gave the steps while they were looking at the picture, they would jump in right away, I'm sure.
Yeah. So I know in like the training world, these are kind of called job aids. But these are actually participatory job aids. Yeah. So people are actually filling them out kind of as they go. And job aids usually, lay out the steps, but this is a different way to do that. So the only other thing I'd add here is that visual templates really help to capture and organize the information. So you facilitate groups, so lots of times, you're probably asking groups to report back on what they've just talked about. So for me, one of the key uses of visual templates is to help support those report backs. So in addition to you're sitting around a table with a group of people, great, you're having a conversation. Without a visual template, often one person's kind of doing the recording. You can't really see, you can't really make connections. So those table templates really help people, first of all, see those connections. But then when they're done, it's all captured and organized. So I find report backs go a lot faster, a lot smoother. We save time because everyone's, I'm kind of holding it up, but everyone's template is consistent. Yeah. So yeah, capture and organize information.
That's a really good idea, yeah. I'm sure the responses you get from your sessions are good in that people get an experience from it. They don't just learn, there's an experience connected to it as well.
Yeah, definitely. Yeah. So those are kind of the, how templates really can support group learning, essentially. And I haven't even had time to add icons to my graphic recording yet because I keep flipping around. But you can see, even going back to that idea of, listening and then organizing. So, you don't have to draw a lot of icons. So I've just, I put a title. Actually, I do, I'm going to add some people here because it's all about supporting group work. So people obviously make up groups. So we'll add some, and you can see once again how simple. I'm not drawing extensive people here because if everyone would probably get off the Blab chat because it would just be me really kind of, oh yeah, I'm going to draw their face and I'm going to, really drawing detailed people. So how templates, so how they support groups, if I just kind of finish that up.
Okay, so that's a great point where if someone were, like Catherine has said here, some people are artistically challenged, but your people are just made up of a circle, a triangle, and 2 lines. That's it.
That's right. Yeah, so I mean, I like to say too, I have no, and I forgot the legs on this one, I have no visual training. I have no drawing training, and in fact, I grew up with an older sister who's a visual artist. So I was like, she got all that talent and I got some other talent. But what I realized, so I was in that room, had that aha moment 8 years ago, whoa, am I a visual learner? Whoa, do I need to incorporate this? And I was like, okay, I can't draw. So what am I good at though? What I've always been good at is like creating flip charts and organizing kind of information. So in that sense, I've had to learn and I've had to practice. But the other thing about practicing is like, if you draw something 10 times, your muscles, there's muscle memory and your muscles remember that. So draw it 10 times and you will remember it. So that's where it is about practice. And the other thing is the fewer lines on a page that you can put there to make that concept kind of, visual, the better. So in this work, simple is best. So honestly, you don't have to do detailed drawings. You draw simple people. Simple really is best. So yeah. So if we move on, I don't know, do you have any other thoughts or questions? I'm going to move on to those top 5 secrets.
Oh, this is great. I'm loving this. This is really, really good in that what you're also doing for this Blab chat is you're making it alive, and so people won't be complaining that they're just watching 2 heads talking.
Right, I know. So I'm a newbie to Blab chat. So I went on this morning, and I just saw sort of the images of all the Blabs that were going at that time, and I was like, okay, it's 2 heads, or it's like talking heads. So even something like this, putting some paper up, or you said you had another person put the camera down at what they were drawing. Like it doesn't take much to sort of make this a little more engaging. So if we think about our top 5 secrets here, number 1 is all about purpose. So think about that for a minute while I put it up here. So purpose is about beginning with the end in mind. So what's the purpose of the template? Is it to, is it a small group discussion? Is it an individual template? Is it a reflection? Is it an evaluation? So those are ways that I use templates a lot for intros, to reflect, to evaluate, as well as to discuss. So a brainstorm, so how do we get our ideas out there? Synthesizing, so I use them for that as well. So you really need to be focused on what's the purpose of the template. So beginning kind of with the end in mind. So I'm going to walk through these pretty fast. So 1 is purpose. 2 is all about, you have to think about how much time you have, as well as the number of participants.
Oh, yeah.
So again, like I've said, sometimes I use individual templates, sometimes I use table templates. So it really depends on number of participants and amount of time.
Yeah.
So, and the other thing, and I guess that's coming up. So amount of time is, you want people to have the time to first have the conversation, then fill in kind of the template. So in some templates, I have spaces for brainstorming and then kind of final decisions, for example.
Oh.
Yeah, so it doesn't always have to be the same level of conversation.
Yeah.
So number 3 is that you want to keep it simple and really consistent. So this is about things like, what do the icons look like? What are the colors you're using, for example? So we use color a lot to organize. So if I pull one of these back up again, and I show you this soulful template. So what I really like about this is the simplicity of the icons. Also the kind of minimal use of color. So the title has some color, and then the yellow is kind of used as a highlight around different things. So that this for me totally passes that simplicity test. You know, again, this one, there's no color on this one. They don't have to be color, but you could easily see where you could add color to make those headings stand out, for example. But it's the simplicity. The people are all the same. There's not different styles of people. There's a banner for a heading. And the idea of dreams, you can pretty clearly see they want 3 ideas: under strengths, under challenges, and under dreams. So it's really about keeping it simple.
And that's a very good point. I've been digging into Donald Miller's story brand lately, and he has mentioned that based on just neuroscience, that they state that our brain is attracted to clarity and simplicity, and as soon as we're confused or we don't understand something, our brain's natural reaction is to run away because it might be a threat.
Right.
So this totally makes sense.
Yeah, that totally makes a lot of sense. So secret number 5, any guesses?
Purpose, time, simple.
Wait, we didn't do 4. So we have, sorry, I'm skipping ahead here, but number 4 is all about process.
Process, okay.
So if you think of visual templates, yes, they're a product, but focus on the use of visual templates as a process. So how to get participants really engaged in, this is a way to get participants really engaged in their own thinking, their own learning, their own synthesizing, right? So beyond, it's not a product, but a process. So, however, you know, there's lots of ways you can also use it as a product.
Yes.
Okay, so now I'm going to go back to you. So what are your guesses for number 5?
One of the first things I thought when you started holding up the templates is that if I were going to like a meeting or a session where we were digging into challenges, strength, etc., I would love to have that template to take back to my cubicle or whatever, desk, and it would be such a good refresher and reminder as opposed to just looking at scribbled notes.
Definitely, yeah, for sure. So that's like that takeaway. And so that's where if we go back to this, like, how do they support groups? It's to capture and organize information. And one of the things I didn't say there is to have a clear takeaway. So I would say that's how they support groups. Okay. And then designing and using them, purpose, time, simple, process. The other thing I would add here, although I think that's a really good one, is to really have a clear path. So a clear path and also space so that people can write. So I've seen some templates where you just don't know where to start, and then it's so filled that you actually don't have enough space to put to actually fill it out.
Yeah, that makes sense.
Right. So and this is really about kind of using and designing. So, but your point around, that you have that takeaway. I'm going to add that up here so that you get a clear and a clear takeaway.
Because the other thing, I guess, for me is that sometimes I've been to, let's say, like a keynote at a conference or a good session, and I take my notes and I write them down. And then I'm sure a lot of people can relate, is that then you get home back to your desk or home and you see all this written down text that you just like, either you don't bother looking at it or you can't remember why you wrote down a certain word. And I think that these visual templates and results of the process would be such an easier way not only to remember what was talked about in the key points, but you would actually enjoy looking at it again as opposed to your scribbly, messy notes, right?
Totally. So that's where and I know, have you already talked to Mike Rohde?
That's next week.
Next week. So everyone should join next week because Mike Rohde is like the king of the sketch note. So Sketchnote is doing this, but small in a sketchbook. So I personally always carry a sketchbook with me for my own learning, where I am capturing, and I was just actually looking for one of my sketchbooks to see if I could show some ideas of kind of what I've done. So, I'll look around if I see something close by. But that idea of, capturing it, totally remember it. And not only that, but you want to look at it again.
Yeah.
And not only that, but if you do it, you'll get lots of other people really beside you, sitting behind you, sitting at your table saying, whoa, what did you do? Can I take a picture? Let's share that. Like, certainly at conferences I've been at, I've had like mobs kind of running out after me down the hall. Can I please just get a picture of that? And again, simple images. But it could be really cool, though, the idea of a visual template. Imagine at a conference with a number of sessions, if you had a template that, said things like biggest learnings, like cool, clear takeaways, and what is my next, how am I going to apply this? Like just those 3 questions. And you had, 6 or 7 of those at your conference, filled them out, and then you get home and you're, instead of digging through notes upon notes upon notes, you have sort of 6 or 7 things that you can say, oh yeah, learned that. This was my, key learning, and here's how I'm going to apply that learning. Like, that's great takeaway.
That's a great idea. That's something I think the Institute should put in their candidate or the attendee bag this year.
Definitely.
You should brand one of those and get it in that bag there.
Yeah, I think that's a great idea.
Let me see, who can I talk to?
I'm just filling out the rest of my thing here, so that we can see, and I want people to be able to see the whole picture here.
So
can you see that?
Yeah, and one thing I was going to mention when you talked about your own sketch notebooks is, as I said, I'm going to do like an extras, like a show notes kind of things after. Okay. That lives on what's called Padlet, and then that will be the thing that will accompany this video. And so if you want after to take a picture of what you're doing now, and if you find any in your sketchbook that you want to send me a few shots of and those things you were holding up, I'll just add all of that to the well, actually what I can just do is I'll send you the link, and you can just add them in yourself if you like.
Yeah, sure, that sounds great.
It'd be a nice extra for people, for sure.
So you can even see what I'm doing now is that now I'm going back and I'm going to add a few visuals to this because I didn't really have time when I was trying to talk and write the content. So that's always something you can think about when doing kind of large scale notes is like you don't have to get it all in. Yes, it would be great to get it all in real time, but there's possibilities to go back and sort of fill in the picture a little bit.
Yeah, for sure. And I mean, it's like it's a work in progress sort of thing. It's I think it's great what you're doing here. And one of the things that I think is important to point out too is there's color, and that is a thing that we react to a bit more than just for example, like something that's black and white. It makes it a little more alive and interesting for us. So I like that too. One thing I noticed that you said, and I wanted to highlight because I think it's a really great thing you mentioned, is that you use reusable markers. And how does that work?
Yeah, how does that work? So I get them from a place called Neuland in Germany. And so, for example, these ones are really big versus kind of these little ones. Okay. They're both refillable. So essentially, I have my ink bottle, so I can get one of those now. You get your bottle of ink right here. You squeeze it into the end, and then you literally open this marker up and pour the ink in. So I've just opened it. Oops, I lost a part. Open it up and pour the ink in, and then for the small versions, You literally just, they have a little squeeze, they have a little thing on the end, a little, I don't know if you can see this, there's a little hole in the end of that, and you literally put the ink in there and squeeze.
Wow.
So it's very, very easy to refill.
That's awesome, and it's a more environmentally friendly way of doing it. I think that's awesome.
Totally. They are a little bit of an investment up front, but yeah, that, you know, then they're going to last. Because otherwise, a package of markers, if you're doing this all the time, really isn't going to last very long.
That's something we'll share in the notes too. Is maybe a link to that company site too, in case people want to get some of those.
Definitely. Yeah, for sure.
That's awesome. I didn't even know about that, so I'm really interested in that.
Yeah. No, they're not only do they sell markers, but it's like a facilitator's dream. When you get their catalog, I spend an afternoon with my cup of tea, because they have like papers and sticky note, like they have flip chart easels that turn horizontal and vertical. Like they're just always thinking about how to support learning with tools, like, and yeah, so they're pretty amazing.
That is awesome. I'm so glad that we're going to learn about that. So one other question I had here that I mentioned to you earlier was, in terms of, so we titled this visual templates and exercises for learning. So what might be an example of a visual exercise, and what's the goal in doing a visual exercise for you?
I know, so you sent me this question, and honestly, I was like, okay, what does he mean? So you mean doing a visual exercise just to do a visual exercise? Well,
so I'm thinking, for example, if I'm going to facilitate a session and want people to learn more about, I don't know, company culture, for example, and I don't already have pre-made templates because I want them to grab some markers and actually do some of it themselves, like get their hands dirty, so to speak. What could be like an exercise that's visual based as opposed to just writing text down that would help with the learning that day?
Yeah, so perfect. So one of the things I just created was a field guide to visual icebreakers, for example. So that's up on my C Meaning store, but so it's and it's only $9.97. You get 12 visual icebreakers, breaking them down to how to use them and why would you use them. But your idea is kind of that, how do you get them to draw out that vision, for example?
For example, yeah.
Or kind of there to draw out their ideas. So sometimes I will create a template. So one of the other things, the way that templates can work is sometimes people are hesitant to pick up a marker and draw. So if templates are already there with a few little icons, what I find is it opens that up. There's less fear around kind of putting stuff in there. And so sometimes what I will do with the template is leave a space that says like images. For example, I use this tool, and it's a tool from a place called The Grove in San Francisco. They were really the hub of graphic recording for a long time. And they have a whole series of visual templates for strategic planning. And one of their templates is called Cover Story Vision. So it says, okay, you as an organization are going to be on the cover of a magazine. Like, what does the cover look like? What are some of the quotes? What are some of the headings? That sort of thing. So I literally create a template where here's the cover, fill it in.
Oh,
and then, you know, here's the quotes, write them. Here, what are the headings? What are some of the subheadings? What are some of the sidebars, conversations that people might be having? So often I'm using this in visioning. How do we look 5 years ahead of time and say, here's what we've done? Or I do something else, which is, you know, you've won an award. What have you won that award for? Again, 5 years down the road, you're up on stage, you're getting this award. What is it for? What are your key achievements? And I'll create a visual template for that. But so those are some ideas of visual exercises.
Those are great ideas. I would love to like create a sort of a mock Time magazine and do what you said about your cover story. I think that's so genius.
Yeah, so that's kind of, yeah, like the newspaper, the heading. So
Yeah.
so I've done that one too. Newspaper. What's the heading? What are some of the what's the picture? What are the quotes? What are the sidebars? So you fill it out. You decide which magazine or newspaper. Maybe it's an magazine. So that I feel like that it gives people that space to really think outside of the box. But it also gives them enough form and structure. So I don't know if you've ever experienced, so I'm almost always putting paper and markers on tables. But what I find is if I just say, yeah, just, in a World Cafe, for example, where one of the key things is doodle, draw out your ideas, I find markers will stay on the table. But if there's something already there, like some kind of thought bubbles, or it doesn't have to be much, people are so much more willing to pick up a marker and draw on the table, or on the paper on the table.
That's a very good tip, actually. One of the things I was thinking, this might sound a little bit funny, but when Dave Gray was talking on Tuesday, he had this really interesting idea where established companies should create startups within their company that would threaten to bring down the company, and through that exercise, they would learn what they need to be changing and doing to make sure they aren't taken down by an outside startup. And so one of the interesting things I think that would be an exercise in terms of visuals is do the cover story, like do the Time magazine thing or the newspaper headline, but then do the death notice, for example, of saying this company has died and this is kind of why, and they died of whatever, and it took, like, that would be it sounds a bit morbid maybe, but it would be an interesting way to visualize the threat that the competition might bring, or the startup, or someone, or the things that they need to change to make sure they're not taken down by someone.
Right. Yeah, no, I think that's a great point. And I mean, yeah, so, and another thing in terms of what you're saying is just, that's kind of design thinking it uses visuals in so many ways, right? So in design thinking, it's all about like rapid prototyping and how can you use visuals to support that. So that's another way. I like to tell people that visuals is not just about what you draw, but it's any way that you're bringing visuals kind of into the room. So, even for example, one of the things I do, I have these little packages of story cards. So these are photos of all sorts of things. There's, these are beats or whatever, chair, just photos of kind of everyday shapes and objects. So I use these all the time. These are packages of like 48 images. And I use these, again, I bring them into the room. I use them in intros. I use them in reflections, evaluations, what's bubbling up for you. What are you most passionate about in your work? So, and I find especially starting a session with something, it's visual, but people don't have to draw it. This already gets, again, that movement, creativity, thinking outside the box. Sometimes I use these when it's like, okay, where are we stuck? So it's not always that positive thing. Where are we stuck? Let's just go right now and sort of pick a card and let's kind of reflect on that. Sometimes people are talking about these in pairs. Sometimes it's large group, depending on the numbers. But so visuals also don't have to be just about you or the group drawing. It's ways that you can bring kind of those into the room.
Brilliant. I love that idea.
Yeah.
So we're getting up to the hour point here, which is I think is great. There's so many fascinating things you share. This is awesome. I love it. And I love that we have this, like you were walking the talk as you were talking by drawing and showing us all the stuff. So I think the kind of extra show notes that we're going to put alongside this is going to be such a fantastic thing for people to be able to reference. And you got my brain going so much now for some of the upcoming workshops that I have. And it's funny because I did art and art history, and my whole family draws and we paint, and my mom's watercolors now and all this stuff. And for some reason, just because I guess life gets busy and you do your thing, I forget about this piece that I could add to what I'm doing. And so I'm not going to forget anymore after today. But I hope that we can collaborate on more too in the future. And like I said, any of the future bright minds that if you want to record while we're doing them, that would be just awesome.
Yeah, great.
So I really thank you, Corey. Where can people find you?
So they can find me at www.cmeaning.ca or on Twitter, just Corey Melanson. Yeah, those are sort of the main places. And I think, and you had a question too around how, like, so people want to do this, where do they go? So I was going to point people to a couple of my resources and then some other resources. So one is that on my website, if you sign up for my e-newsletter, you get my free icon ebook. Okay. So it is kind of my 12 most used icons and how do I use them and so what are some variations on that. Awesome. So literally go to my website, say click, put in your email. They tend to be like maybe once a month or two, but I try to fill those full of chock full, like what are some hot tips in the visual learning world. For example, in my last one I talked about there's a new kind of mobile whiteboard that you can carry around with you, and there's some really interesting presentation tools. One of them called TAWE, where TAWE, well, they'll let you take a picture, zoom into different parts of it to create a video of your visual. So I try to really fill it with some interesting things, not just, hey, here's what I'm doing. Yep. And I did talk about so I do have a store with some items. So I do have a template package, which includes like, I think it's about 20 template, and you get them in a form where you can print them big or small. But I'd also say check out, like just Google graphic facilitation. Check out some of the people I've talked about, Mike Rohde, Dan Rome, Sunny Brown. Lots of folks have blogs. Lots of folks have some really cool e-newsletters. Some of the Canadian graphic recorders, because I want to put a pitch in there. Some of the Canadian graphic recorders are Sarah Hefner-Waldston out of Montreal. There's a ton of folks in Toronto, and I'm just trying to think of Lisa Sorsa is one of them, and we have some folks out west as well. So there are people who are doing this work in Canada, generally across the major cities.
Awesome.
Yeah.
Well, thanks for that. And what I'll do, like I said, I'll send you the Padlet so you can add to it as well. And then when it's ready with the video, I'll post that up. And then people who weren't able to join us today will be able to see the recording. It'll be amazing.
Awesome. Well, thanks to you, Jim.
Thanks so much. I'm so glad you joined me on this. And I'm pretty sure that there can be something else we could do with this in the future, too. So might be doing a part 2.
Okay. Awesome.
Have a good weekend out there in Halifax, and really appreciate you spending the time with us today.
All right. Thanks.
Okay, cheers, Corey.
Cheers.